Hello, everyone. Good morning and happy new year, everyone. And welcome to the very first author interview of the new year for 2026. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is our very first author of the new year, making her official debut. Now, my guest today is an aspiring author writing her fantasy debut novel, Fate's Author, and with a background in journalism and a focus on creative writing, she has published cultural and lifestyle articles on a local news platform and poetry in college literary journals. She resides in Virginia with her husband, though some say she lives more in books and stories. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to our very first guest of the new year, Jasmine. Jasmine, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem, Jasmine. Anytime, anytime. Now, before we dive into our interview this morning, as a little icebreaker, is there a little known fact that not a lot of people may know about you?
Little known fact. It's a tough one. Um, uh, my favorite drink is boba tea. I don't know how you
Nice.
know that, but it's a good one.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Jasmine, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm so excited to talk to you about your book, which I'm very, very intrigued by. Now, of course, without spoiling too much of the story, what can readers expect from your debut novel?
Well, it's about a college graduate set in a medieval world, and she is trying to join the king's military task force. And to do that, she has to go through his annual competition at the kingdom's capital city. And there she faces a few dangers, makes a few friends that she may or may not want to make. And while she's there, she gets to use the king's magic.
Ooh,
It's basically what it's about.
nice. I like it. I really, really like it. So before we dive further into the creation of this story, let's talk a little bit more about you, Jasmine, the behind the scenes of the author. So from your bio, you are a very creative person, love reading, and you have a background in journalism. So how did that background in journalism transition over to writing your very first story? Was there a specific aha moment that really sparked that curiosity and drive, or has that always been with you?
I feel like I've always loved writing. I've always loved storytelling. I think journalism really gave me a new perspective when it comes to writing, when it comes to characters and people. And it's funny because in journalism, I was on the side of interviewing more than being interviewed. So I got to talk to a lot of different people, a lot of different stories, and all of that is very inspiring. And you can look around, you can find stories with whoever you meet. So that was
Absolutely.
very inspiring for me.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, in regards to your debut novel itself, what was the creative spark that really brought this idea to life?
So for this one, I just have a running notes of ideas I have throughout time. I think I had for this idea, it was slightly different. I sat down, I fleshed it out a year ago, actually in January. I can't remember where I got this idea. It might have been from a dream, but yeah, and, um, just did a little bit of brainstorming and turned it into what it is today.
Awesome. Awesome. So now let's actually dive into the creation of the story. And again, if these are too spoiler-ish questions, feel free to give as very little as to keep some things, ready for the reader. So as the first question of this segment of the interview, Jasmine, when you were writing your novel, your story, would you consider yourself to be a outliner, planner, or a pantser?
Oh, I am more of an outliner. I love outlines. But with that being said, I do leave room to venture out and change things. But usually I do need the outline just to kind of organize my thoughts. And, there's some variation there, but yeah, I love my outlines.
Same, same. I've tried being a pantser. It works, but it's way too difficult. I like having a distinct, clear outline from A to B. It really helps. It really helps. But that's not the same for every author, which that's what I've learned from doing these interviews for very, very long time. And from that point, when crafting an outline, did you have a routine or ritual that kept you grounded in the sense of having a clear plan of when you wanted the book to be finished, at least the rough draft version?
My goal was to at least finish the whole first draft in a year. I really had no idea how long it would take. This is my first attempt at ever writing a book, actually. And I had a few just life changes that took some time away from that. I moved from California to Virginia, and that took some time. I was on the road then. But yeah, I I had a funny thought in my brain too, like, oh, I'll just finish editing at the end of this year, and that is not happening at all. um,
Man, oh man. Well, I wish you the very, very best. I mean, it's daunting, especially working on your first book. I know I had the exact same feeling when I was writing my first. It was a little bit of a challenge and a little bit intimidating, but of course, at the very end, it is well worth it to see something that you created right in front of you. And just, it's a very uplifting moment to say, like, I did that. I was able to do this.
yeah, I totally agree.
And when you were in that moment of writing the first draft, Jasmine, sorry, what really surprised you about the writing aspect at that point in time of being an author, as opposed to going back in the past a little bit, writing poems for collegiate literary journals?
This is just writing a book is such a huge scale. I couldn't even really imagine it. I feel like I probably should have used a better story structure, plot structure. They talk about the
Mhm.
seven act structure, whatever. I kind of just went for it. I was like, oh, I could tell a story. And, I look at it and I'm like, it's very hard to like zoom out, look at the whole thing as a
Mhm.
picture, and then zoom in and manage to get all the details right. So it's just a much bigger scale than a poem would be.
Absolutely, very, very true, Jasmine. And now we're actually going to go into our first fan question of the interview. And again, this may be a spoiler-ish question, so feel free to answer as much or as little. And one of my viewers asked, when writing your sorry, your novel, who was your favorite character to really flesh out, as well as your favorite scene?
Oh, favorite character. My favorite character to flesh out was the prince in my story. Um, I don't usually write from the perspective of a man. And so it's kind of fun and it's kind of different, kind of challenging, especially just because I love trying to write a character with a personality that's just completely different from my own. And so his character was a lot of fun to write. What was the second part of the question?
Oh, yes. The second part was, what probably your most difficult scene to write in your novel?
Most difficult scene. I'm struggling the most with the beginning. I think there's just a lot of pressure there at the beginning. You want to, hook the reader, introduce what your book is all about, but you don't want to lore dump and you want to introduce your characters, but they don't have a reason to care about your characters yet. And so there's a lot of pressure at the beginning.
Yes, very, very true. Absolutely, Jasmine. And with that said, when you fully embarked on this is something that I want to do and reaching the end of this journey, at least this first part, before getting it edited, getting it formatted, and all of that good stuff, what was the goal you had in mind? I think you already mentioned before, but going forward with this book, what was the ultimate goal? And also, what is sort of the promise you're making to your prospective readers and fellow like minded authors?
I mean, there's like the technical goals of obviously getting it edited, but my overarching goal is just to write something that people will enjoy. I mean, reading is fun. It started out as being fun, and I think, it's turned into like, oh, is there good commentary about the world? And oh, is it, dark enough? Can I relate to that? And I'm like, I just want to write something fun. And that's what I hope readers take away from it, that it's enjoyable. It's not, a competition to be like, this isn't as good as Token or whatever. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
I just want you to enjoy something that maybe you've never read before. So,
Very true. That is very, very true. And that's something that we're definitely going to be touching on again when we get into the business side of being an author. So, going forward down this journey of being an author, the next question I would like to ask you is probably the one that every author gets asked at some point in their journey is, of course, dealing with the dreaded writer's block and coupled with imposter syndrome. Those are always going to be with us no matter what, no matter how many times we try to avoid it, no matter how many seminars or workshops that help us try to navigate through it, it's always going to be there. So, for you, Jasmine, writing your very first book, how did you overcome these two very daunting internal aspects that a lot of creatives deal with?
okay. So for writer's block, I think this is exactly why I'm an outliner. Like, even if I feel uncreative, I wrote an outline, I wrote what it's about. So I just got to power through it. And my mentality is, if this is a chapter I end up hating, like, I can change it later. I can go back. I can rewrite this. And I'm doing that now. And it's very freeing. It's very refreshing. But I'm glad I powered through it at the time. So it's not something you need to beat yourself up about. It's kind of just something you got to go through. Because writing is, it's creativity, but it's also discipline. Like, you can learn how to write, and when you know how to, you just got to go for it, whether you feel
Mhm.
inspired or not sometimes. Um, and imposter syndrome, that one's harder to get over, but at the same time, I remind myself everyone started out in the same place. Like,
Mhm.
some of our greats were also, questioning themselves all the time, and you never know what happens.
Absolutely, very, very true. And you hit the nail on the head, Jasmine, that all the authors that we've admired who are literary great in their respective genres also went through the exact same things as we did. And we don't really talk about that in regards to the greats. We never really considered that at one point in time they were just like us in the same pitfall, the same hurdles, because we only recognize their success. We don't ever acknowledge the struggles that they had to endure along the way. And I think it is important to talk about that. And another question I want to ask you, Jasmine, is at what point did you tell friends and family that you were embarking on this journey? And the reason why I ask this is because a lot of authors that I have interviewed over the years have shared their experiences of the hesitancy of reclaiming, or rather claiming, the title of being an author. I'm sure you've heard from fellow creatives you had the opportunity to meet virtually or on social media that whenever we say that, oh, I'm an author, we kind of get a mixed reaction from strangers and possibly sometimes friends and family. So I'm very curious, Jasmine, when you told your friends and family that you were embarking on this journey of being an author, what was their reaction like?
I mean, for the most part, I think it's been pretty supportive. My family has always known that I love writing. And I think they got actually a little happy to see that I was going after a dream of mine rather than, working my corporate job. And they were like, we see you doing this more than that. And so they were very supportive there. I told my family pretty much right away that I was working on it. And as for friends, I didn't really tell that much until I had finished the first draft. I think I maybe needed that sense of like I accomplished something, like I actually wrote the book first before it became more publicly known. Maybe just for myself, I don't know how people would have reacted if I had told them before I had finished that. But for the most part, everyone has been very supportive. They keep saying, I want to read your book when it gets published. And I'm like, I don't know the end date for that, but it's really kind.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really awesome that you have a really good support system that hypes you up and is your biggest cheerleader. And that kind of leads into some reflective questions, which I'm going to start with. What does it mean to be an author in the digital age? Because being an author now is greatly different than what it was 20 years ago. Social media has definitely changed the games for everyone. It is a double-edged sword. It can be very supportive, very engaging, allow us to meet like-minded individuals, but unfortunately, like everything else, there is another side. We leave ourselves exposed to the masses. Everything about us is out there on the internet, and hate speech, trolls, and the negativity, that's unfortunately going to be a part of us since we are public figures in the social media world as authors. It can be very daunting, very draining, and definitely add to the imposter syndrome. So ultimately, Jasmine, with that said, what has still disciplined you to still be the same author you were when you started this journey and keep true to yourself?
I think what's kind of kept me going is the fact that I'm not writing this book for other people necessarily. Like, I want other people to enjoy it and to love it. And if they don't, that's okay, because ultimately I'm writing this book for myself. Just because it's something I've always wanted to do, and I love writing and I love the story. And so I get the most satisfaction from that, and I hope other people can kind of join me in that way. But if it's not for you, like, it's not for you. There's plenty of books that I don't like that much that other people love, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And this kind of goes into the next question of, are we in a golden age or not? And the reason I bring up this question, Jasmine, is that over the past 3 years on YouTube, but 6 years in total doing this show, I've had the opportunity to meet so many authors from hybrid, traditional, and indie. And a majority of the authors that I've had on the show, using last year as an example, all began their journey of being authors during the height of the lockdown, the quarantine years. And a lot of people agree that the lockdown became a hub for new creatives, new like-minded individuals. And when things started getting a little bit better, the floodgates opened. And authors specifically took the publishing world by storm. And this, of course, has led to the discussion of, is the market overly saturated with these new voices? Because, of course, once you've comb through everything with a fine tooth comb, you have to realize, okay, there are people who are passionate about being writers and those that are just there for the money to get a quick buck. But now we have to deal with a new thing on the rise, which is AI. Now, I've said on the show numerous times in numerous other interviews that AI as a tool can be used in conjunction with being an author. It's a great tool to refine our outlines, to make sure everything flows correctly, and there's no plot points that were not used effectively. That is fine. Generative AI is the main thing that a lot of creatives have issue with, because it mass produces a false sense of creativity to the masses, and unfortunately, now more corporations and companies are siding with generative AI because it is faster, but it doesn't have that human feel, that connection that a human written story would have as opposed to a computer generated story. So ultimately, Jasmine, my question to you is this: seeing all of this on social media, hearing about it, and just keeping up with the trends every now and then, do you believe, in your own opinion, that we are teetering on this teeter totter of a golden age on one end and a potential cyber dark age on the other?
I think that we're heading more into a golden age. I tend to be a bit more of a positive person anyway.
Hmm.
And I do see that most writers are against generative AI. I am myself. I think it's like I don't actually think it's that good. I mean, it feels like a robot. It feels too perfect. And I want to read something that is messy, and I want to read something that sometimes doesn't make sense. And I don't care if it's missing a plot point. It's stories aren't structures. They don't have to be structures. They can just be stories. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I tend to believe that a lot of people are against that. A lot of people um, want to show, who they are, what they can do, what they can write, and they want to share just the things that are in their head more than, just use AI for content. We don't need more content. We don't we don't need to put more stuff out in the market that's all the same, written by the same, AI bot.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just think we as people, we don't really want that. We really want to see something real, something we relate to. And like you said, we want to see that human element. Yeah, so I agree.
Very true. Very, very true, Jasmine. And now we go into probably my favorite segment, the business side of being an author. Now, as an icebreaker question for this segment, so as of course, marketing is probably one of the biggest things that an author has to deal with when they reach that stage. And it's definitely the most daunting and challenging because we're not marketers, we're not PR people, we have no backgrounds in business, and yet we are expected to have a plan of when we're going to release the announcements. If we're doing ARC reads or beta reads applications, when are we releasing those? And understanding who exactly we're trying to market toward, where we're going to publish, all that stuff and more. It can be very overwhelming. So I'm very curious, Jasmine, have you done a little bit of research of that aspect of being an author to get a sense of what would work best for you when you reach that stage?
I've done a little bit of research. I try not to spiral into it too much and tell myself to focus on writing and just do a little bit here and there. Obviously, I have social media going just to try and start to get in the community and see what other people are doing, see what I can do. I do plan to have beta readers, and I do plan to try to go traditional publishing. And we'll see how it goes, but I'm figuring it out as I go along.
Absolutely, which is, again, the same mindset that all of us out there have when we are working on our first book, just trying to figure out as things go on and just improving and refining with every new book that we publish. So, from that point, let's talk about understanding the audience, because I think that is a very important topic to discuss. Now, as I'm sure you definitely have heard and will agree that for us authors, we are the target audience first and foremost because we know the story better than anyone else. But when we do make the decision to publish the story, we have to then consider, okay, what genre does this book really fall under? Who are we marketing towards? What is the reader group, the age group that's going to be attracted to a book like this, and more? And some authors have conflicting answers on this. Some say it is important to write for the audience. Some say it's important to write for the specific readership, but it varies upon the individual. So this is a two-part question, Jasmine. The first part of the question is for you as the author, do you have a good idea of your audience and or readership genre? And secondly, how difficult was it to really figure out that specific genre and audience?
Mm. The first part of the question, I think I have a pretty good general idea of the audience. Um, Probably just people like myself. Um, I'm writing an epic fantasy, but I'm also writing a clean adult fantasy. Um, and so it's kind of hard because when you say clean, you're like, oh, you could go either way. You could go into YA, but I don't want it to have a YA feel.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of answers the second part a little bit. Is I struggled. It started out as a YA, and then I was like, no, this is too. I can't do it. And so I had to adjust some things to just to I don't want to avoid things that are real and difficult and heavy, just to make it clean, but at the same time, I do want anyone to be able to enjoy it. And it is a little difficult because I have some romance. There's a romance subplot, but it's not a romantasy. So
Right.
like I'm not really targeting that genre, that group of people. But if you are a romantasy reader and you want to see more fantasy than romance, then maybe you could give it a try.
Absolutely. And again, you hit the nail right on the head. And this kind of goes into the next question, which I think a lot of authors really don't take into account, which is I'm sure you've seen as a reader as well some books with a tagline saying the next so and so. Now, from a reader's perspective, that's going to instantly hook us into the story. But from an author's perspective, that may be very damaging because it gives a false expectation or an unrealistic expectation to live up to that specific book. I'll give an example. One of my favorite stories that I read a few years ago was the trilogy by the late Victor Milan, Dinosaur Knights series. That was marketed as Jurassic Park meets Game of Thrones. Now, I have never read either of those books, but I had an inkling of what to expect. Now, thankfully, those expectations were met for me and I loved it. However, that's not always going to be the case. And secondly, for us as authors, we find ourselves on this tight-roping act of wanting to showcase our individuality as authors, but also trying to realize and understand the genre that we're writing in. We don't want to write a story that's too new that's going to throw people off. But we don't want to write a story that's too familiar that's going to be seen as a rehash of a story that already exists. So for you, Jasmine, when writing your story, how did you balance the two to really hit the home run, so to speak, of your voice, your unique voice as an author? And did your journaling background play a role in that? Because as journalists, you also want to showcase your voice. You want to showcase how you tell stories, highlighting your prose, your writing style that's unique to you. That's why every journalist is very different. They may report on the same story, but how they report on it is unique to them.
Yeah, so this was a difficult one for me too, because I didn't want to write something that was just like exactly what's on the market, but I wanted to write something that, feels a little familiar to the reader, to where it's not completely out there. And so I drew more inspiration from things I grew up on that are, over 10 years old or whatever. That have a lot of same elements that I think don't die, like relationship between characters, or a classic, because mine has trials and competition, and I think that's a
Mhm.
pretty classic trope that happens again and again, and I took a little bit of a different take on it. I hope that it's a
Mhm.
little bit more unique in that way. I focused a little bit more on like the social and mental aspects of a competition. So not just sword fighting there. Um, and then the second part of your question, what was your second part? I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. The second part of the question was, did your background in journalism possibly play a role in helping you find your voice?
Yes, I think it did. Journalism is unique in the way that it teaches you to really cut out fluff. It's
Mm,
very interesting. Every single word matters, and especially helps with line editing. You go through and you're like, there is a more concise way to put this. And in journalism, we tell stories, and we like to say like, you should tell a story in the way that you would tell your mom. So you would go home and you would say, Mom, there was a fire, right? You start with the big event. And then that leads to the questions of, oh my gosh, what fire? What happened? Who started it? So I think that does affect my writing a little bit. Um, and I'm glad it does. Journalism taught me a lot of just different forms of writing. I love fluffy prose sometimes, but also sometimes I read it, I'm like, what is this even saying? And what is the point of this paragraph? And so I think journalism really helps you kind of cut to the point a little bit.
very true. And it actually reminds me of another quote that another one of my good friends actually almost did the same thing is I forgot what author he was quoting, but it pretty much was the same thing that you just said, Jasmine. And they used the analogy of cutting the fat off of a pig. You want to get rid of the fat. The fat is good sometimes, but you don't want all of the fat. You want to get rid of it so it's just the lean muscle. And I like that analogy very, very much. Now, before we go further, there was another fan question one of my viewers wanted to ask, and that was, what are some of your favorite books that may have played a role or a research aspect in your novel?
Oh, some favorite books that have played a role. The tough one. I really liked the Throne of Glass series for a few reasons. There's some parts that I didn't like about it, but there's a lot of things I liked about it. But some of my favorite authors, this is completely different, is I really love Agatha Christie and I
Mhm.
love her books. And it's crazy to me how short they are sometimes. But then it just reminds me like you don't need to write a million words to have a good story. It can be short, it can be concise, and every single plot, point, detail, it's important, right?
Yeah.
Everything counts. And it's like it's all unfolding and it's before, the murder happens and you're like, wait, this is important. I need to remember all these things because it's gonna tell me who did it. And so I love the fact that she can do that. I'd love to write a murder mystery, but that sounds like a hard challenge. But yeah,
Nice.
her writing inspires me a lot.
All right. All right. And another fan question is probably one of my favorite fan questions to ask, Jasmine. One of my viewers asked, in your opinion, Jasmine, which of the five senses, physical senses specifically, is probably the most difficult to emulate in storytelling?
Oh, I think what's actually difficult to emulate is sight because we tend to overuse it. I saw this happen and then, I see this and, he looked at me and we use those words a lot. And it's really hard to convey what we're seeing without overdoing it a little bit or relying too hard on just what we see. And I feel like something that kind of messes it up is like we sometimes think of our book as a movie and we try to like play it out in a movie sense. And that's just highly visual and it's really hard to not overdo it or yeah, just use the same words over and over again.
Yes, absolutely, very true. And ah, actually, I take it back. This is probably my favorite fan question to ask authors, and I kind of like this edition. It's a nice little fun one. And this actually comes from a longstanding viewer of the channel. who asks, if your book and characters had a theme song, what theme song would they have? So you can break it down to the overall theme song of the book. And for the characters, let's narrow it down to the three main characters. What would their theme song be?
Oh no, I have such a disappointing answer to this question. I know most people have like an epic Spotify playlist for their book, and I never got around to that. This is really embarrassing. When I'm writing, I don't have an epic theme song playing. I actually have just like a study playlist playing, and it's a bunch of instrumental piano music.
Oh, that's fine. That's completely fine.
Yeah, so I don't have a specific answer for this, unfortunately.
Okay, okay. Well, kind of as a follow up to that, if your book was adapted into a film or limited TV show, who would you want to direct the project? And secondly, for again, the three main characters in this novel, who would you want to play those characters?
Oh man, I'm so sorry. I wish I had a better answer. I try not to think about this because I don't know, maybe it's disappointing. I'm like, oh, it could be a movie. And then, a lot of great books never get movies or films. So I don't have a good answer. I'm sorry.
That's fine. That is completely fine. It can possibly change later down the road, but that is completely fine. And as we're nearing the end of this amazing interview, Jasmine, there were two very important questions that I did want to ask you, which is probably the most daunting question any author does not want to answer, but they are required to internally in this sense, which is as authors, we can keep writing until our fingers go numb or our minds just stop. But at the end of the day, everything has to come to an end. Stories are no exception. And when we're writing stories, especially if it's our first debut novel, there are so many things we could add to it. But we have to realize and make the decision, do we want to include that in or can we save it? Almost as what you were talking about, getting rid of the fluff in a novel. It's a very, very daunting and intimidating moment because as we reach that point, we're making the decision of, I'm done with the story, I'm done writing, it's finished. And that could be a very scary moment in the sense of, are we truly done? Are we really finished? And we're going to be second guessing ourselves. So, for you, Jasmine, in your opinion, when do you believe a story is truly finished? And when do you think an author should stop writing to preserve the authenticity of their stories?
And I think a story should be finished when the conflict or the struggle that you've introduced is finally resolved. Whether that's a good ending or a bad ending, as long as we have answered that question of the conflict that we introduce. And it's hard if you try to leave loose ends because then we feel like those questions weren't answered and things weren't solved, and it's not as satisfying to try to keep dragging things out versus giving us a good answer to all the things we've been wondering about. So once you answer that, you can't drag it on. Might ruin it.
Yes, beautifully said, Jasmine. Beautifully said. And now we arrive at the final two questions of this amazing author interview. Now, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about your journey of an author, what you've learned so far, getting your voice right, understanding the audience, and more. And you will probably continue to learn more and learn more things about being an author, the business side, growing a brand, and so forth. So, at this point right now in your life, what do you want people to take away from your story as an author? And when your story does become published and it's out there for the masses, what do you want readers to pull from this story? And ultimately leave them with a pearl of wisdom, so to speak.
Hmm, that's a tough question. I think ultimately my story, while it is a fun read, and I think it is a fun read, I think it also explores these themes of belonging. My main character, she wants to belong to something because that's where she's tied her self-worth. Um, and so she'll do things for, who she's loyal to that she's not necessarily proud of or agrees with. And so I think it's like a good thing to think about of like why we do things, whether it's the right thing to do or if we're doing it just because we're tied to something else that we say we're tied to. So I hope it makes people think a little bit of, what how those things just affect our own actions and how we treat people and all those things.
Beautifully said, Jasmine. Beautifully said. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude our first ever author interview of the new year for 2026. I want to give a huge thank you to Jasmine for coming on the show. Now, Jasmine, where can people find you on social media if they want to reach out and connect? And do you have any special shout outs you want to give to people that have helped you on your journey thus far?
Yeah, you can find me on TikTok or Instagram. Both are at Jasmine Ball Writes. And as far as shout out, I just thank everyone who knows me, who's interacted with me, and who's been so kind. I just thank you for encouraging me in that way.
Awesome. I will link all that down below in the description of this video. And Jasmine, I know this is a probably big question to ask, but if viewers and commenters do ask, when could they potentially see your novel being released within 2026?
Well, I am finishing edits this year. I am querying agents this year. So maybe in 2027, we'll see.
All right, all right. You heard it here, folks. And also, viewers and listeners, if you know any publishers or agents looking for new books, comment down below and I will get them to Jasmine. That's why I love doing these segments, viewers and listeners. As authors, we are in the same boat trying to help one another. So if you know any agent or know someone that is close with an agent or publisher, send them all to Jasmine's social media links provided down below. And also, viewers and listeners, if you're looking for your next New Year's read, make sure to check out all of my books on Goodreads, which I'll provide the link down below. They're available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble in print and ebook format. And viewers and listeners, once more, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with the guests coming out for 2026 in January and some surprises along the way. And until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy New Year's, everyone, and we will see you all in the next episode. Take care and bye-bye.